home renovations. What should I do to my house? Or maybe more importantly, what should I not do to my house to improve the value and make it my own? It's Mike and Rachel Novak from the Novak Real Estate Team right here in Snohomish County with another video for you. And we're diving into the topic of renovations today. If you find value in this video, please like, share, subscribe, and that we get notified as we put out new videos. Let's jump right into this. This is kind of a fun one because I've seen so many stupid things that people have done to houses. I'm just going to call it and put it out there, right?
No joke. No joke.
And a lot of people do these stupid updates and they look at me and they're like, well, why wouldn't, I put $50,000 into this upgrade. Why wouldn't a buyer pay for that? I'm like, well, they didn't want that shit.
Exactly.
Right? So let's really get tactical on this. But before we get into like some of the worst upgrades to do, some of the best upgrades to do, let's talk about maybe the concept of how to even look at the perspective of doing renovations, right?
Yes,
like what's the big picture here? And I think we should start with talking about how to finance upgrades to a house, because a lot of people, they don't know what to do there. What would you tell people is like a possible strategy to finance the upgrades to their house?
Yeah, I mean, like one of the most popular and I think least known are people utilize the equity in their home that they already have, and they get a home equity line of credit. They get a HELOC. Going and getting a HELOC to be able to invest in the home, as long as you've got a strategy and a plan for what exactly that money is going toward, and making sure that you're, of course, strategic with that you're going to have a return on it and be able to pay that off. That is probably the best way to finance any sort of upgrades or remodels, cosmetic updates to a property.
Yeah, and you can get a HELOC, a home equity line of credit, from a local bank. Like credit unions tend to be kind of like a go-to place for this. Mortgage companies typically are not the best, actually, believe it or not. And I want to separate in your mind the difference between a home equity line of credit and a cash out refinance, okay? Because these are two very different things, yet they get kind of mixed up a lot as people have these conversations. A home equity line of credit most of the time is going to be a better option for you, especially if you've had your home during like 2018, 19, 20, 21, 22, like any of those years where you had like a super low interest rate. You would not want to give up that interest rate to tap into the equity of your home. If you do a cash out refinance, you're literally refinancing that rate and pulling out money. Not the best idea in a lot of different scenarios, okay? So by doing a HELOC, you're literally just putting a second mortgage on. You're keeping that first mortgage and that really low interest rate. So I just want to make sure that you understand that difference, because this could actually be a really, really expensive mistake.
Yeah. Such a great point, because just exactly like you said, getting a home equity line of credit maintains the integrity of your first mortgage with whatever rate that you already have. You keep that exact mortgage in place, including those same payments. And then what you're doing is just opening up the equity on the rest of the home between what you owe on it and what it's worth to be able to tap into any of that you want to use. You don't have to use it all. You can use however much of it you want to. Whereas a cash out refi wraps that old mortgage into a brand new loan with a completely updated interest rate, changes your entire payment for your house.
Yep.
Good point.
The second point I want to highlight is looking at the timeline of how long you think you'll be in your house, right? I think that this can really be a good compass of what to do and what not to the home. If you're going to be in the home for just like the next 3 to 5 years, I think you need to be very tactical in what you do and be less preferential about what you want personally. We'll talk about that a little bit more today and get very specific with you. But if you're going to be in the home for the next like 7, 10, 15, 20 years, or that's like your house, like this is like the forever home, I think that you can go off the rails a little bit more with really customizing that house, because you're doing it for personal benefit and enjoyment. It's not just about getting the money back, right? We're kind of separating that conversation at that point. That's the fork in the road between ROI, return on investment, and just personal satisfaction, what I like in my house.
Exactly right. Yep. Great point.
Okay. So what are some of the things that people should not do? Let's jump into that.
Oh, you want to start with those ones, huh? Okay. So like, are we talking that they absolutely shouldn't do, or that they shouldn't do if they're trying to get the highest return on that upgrade?
Let's look at this from an ROI perspective. Like let's just assume, let's frame the conversation for today from the perspective that you're going to hold on to your home for the next 5 years. So you need to make sure that you're going to get this money back. You can't just throw it out, because a lot of people, they're not going to stay in their home for 20 years, right? So let's just look at this conversation today from that perspective, okay?
So the majority of people, when they think about it, they're actually going to be staying in their home for the next 4 to 5 years, doing these kind of upgrades. They are not going to net you more money, essentially, or they're not going to net you as much money as they probably are going to cost you. So one of the ones that I've seen and that I recommend you not do is re-side your entire house with an expensive type of siding, like a cedar siding. I saw there was a teammate that had a house that he was trying to sell earlier this year in 2024. And the client really liked the look of cedar siding. So he pulled off all the hardy plank and he put on cedar siding. I think it was $50,000 to put on cedar siding all over the property. And it looked great. But that is not a feature that buyers are going to say, yes, I will pay $50,000 more for that house for that type of site.
From some buyers' perspective, that actual situation might decrease the value because cedar siding, you have to repaint every few years. It's not going to last 50 years like hardy plank is going to last, all those other types of things. But let's back up just a little bit and let's kind of like frame the big picture of bad ideas. Okay, bad ideas could be something like overbuilding for your neighborhood, right? Like, hey, I'm spending $200,000 to update my house to make it just the most pimped home on the street. And I'm going to be into this house $700,000 and the average home price here is $500,000. Like, why is that a bad idea?
Yeah. So let's take a look at, how a home is priced and how the perception of value is held in buyers in any market is they're going to look at your property in comparison to homes right in its close vicinity. And so if you spend a ton of money making your home the absolute most gorgeous, biggest, most beautiful home on the block, and there is not another home within the vicinity to substantiate that kind of value, buyers are going to have a hard time agreeing that your home is worth $200,000 more.
Yeah, it's going to be really hard to get all those upgrades back. You're going to get a portion of them, like a sliver, but you're definitely not going to get dollar for dollar because you've outbuilt the neighborhood, right? What about like kind of piecemealing updates to a home? Like, you kind of talked about this patchwork quilt of designs where nothing really flows. Why is that a bad idea?
So really, really important. There's a lot of people that, it's very, very normal to update one room a year or update one area at a time. And so what I've seen is, people will update the master bathroom when they first move into the house. And then the next year they're going to do the main bath and the downstairs powder bath. And instead of sticking with the same themes, utilizing similar textures, similar colors, similar tiles, similar styles, they will do completely different designs and colors and schemes in those rooms. And what happens when you do that, we have all these different kind of designs and different kind of styles and textures, is when you come into the home afterward, it doesn't feel congruent. It looks and feels like a completely different house in different areas. And that breaks up the value. The perception of value for a buyer coming in is that it's disjointed. It doesn't feel like it belongs together. So it's so subtle. And most people do it on accident, to be honest with you, because this year they're really into those colors and it's the style to do this. And then 2 years later, the style has totally changed. So instead of keeping with that original style and maintaining it throughout the home, they're going to go with the most recent modern style, thinking that's the right thing. When in reality, you've got to keep the home congruent. You've got to at least have the same style, the same feel. It doesn't all have to be the exact same color, the exact same tile, but keeping the same feel, the same flow is incredibly important in maintaining a good value and having a good return on the investment that you're making.
Definitely. The one last kind of generalized thing I would caution people on is updating their home with credit cards, right? Like we kind of talked about using a HELOC as the preferred way to do it so you have access to cheap money. But doing upgrades to your home where you're paying 15 to 25% interest is a really, really shitty business decision. Like that's just not good financially, right? So definitely do not recommend doing that. That's going to result in paying so much more for the total cost of the upgrade by paying all that money in interest unless you pay it off immediately. So, all right, you mentioned like some very specific bad upgrades. Let's dive deeper into that conversation and some of the things that you think would be a really, really bad idea if you're going to be selling your home in the next 5 years. What would be another one for you?
So I mentioned the cedar siding. One that we talked about earlier were solar panels.
This is going to be controversial because people love green energy. We both drive Teslas, right? So we're like totally on board with the whole EV model and all of that. But just when we've seen this time after time where people spend $50,000 on solar panels and their home does not have $50,000 added to the value right away. Like it's not going to be a dollar for dollar enhancement. And a lot of people think it will be. So I hate to bring you back to reality, but that's just the hardcore truth of it. So be cautious about solar panels. If you're going to do solar panels, consider that something for your personal enjoyment, not something you're going to get ROI on necessarily.
Well, and I think that the misconception is that people invest in solar panels in order to save on their monthly payment and for like deferments, right? Like the electrical companies will pay you back for the electricity and for the energy that you're not utilizing, which is great. But you cannot expect a buyer to also inherit that same ideal. They are not going to pay the $40,000, $50,000 that solar cost you when they go to purchase the home because you've already gotten the savings for it.
Yeah.
Right. So now it's included in the home. So they're not going to, that does not make your home worth an extra 40.
And let's just do some simple math. Let's just say that your electrical bill is $200 a month, and that's $24 a year, but you're paying $50,000 for solar panels, right? You need to live in that home for 21 years for that
20,
to pencil.
25 years.
Yeah. That's a very, very long ROI in my book. So caution you on that one. One of the other ones would be pools. In fact, pools will actually detract a lot of buyers because they're very expensive to maintain. They're expensive to heat. And they're kind of a liability for people that have kids as well. And a lot of people think hey, this is an awesome amenity. This is a very personalized update to your house. Would you agree? Especially in the Northwest. If we're in Arizona, if we're in Vegas, Texas, put the pool in all day long. ROI for sure. But in Washington, hell no.
It's a no. Yeah, exactly right. Another one is that I haven't seen often, but I have seen it enough to mention it. People thinking that doing copper gutters or a copper roof is a big flex. It's beautiful. It's super cool. You will not get that money back when you go to sell the home. There are not enough buyers that see the value in that. In fact, again, similar to solar, it changes color over time, right? As it's weathered, it changes color and does not have that big, beautiful, bright, brassy look anymore. So avoid the copper gutters and avoid the copper roof because you are not going to get the return on that investment.
What about wood windows? I see wood windows in some very expensive homes. Is that an upgrade that you think is worth doing?
I don't think so.
How come?
Because one, it reduces the efficiency of energy. So you're not going to have the same kind of seals and energy efficiency inside the home with your heating system. And number two, they can be very expensive to replace and maintain.
Yeah, the maintenance is the part that really gets me on it. So I don't recommend doing it either. Get a high-end vinyl or or fiberglass window, but I don't recommend the wood windows either. Yep. What about expensive roof updates?
You're talking metal?
Metal or a 50-year roof, is that worth doing?
So it was really going to completely depend on your neighborhood because there are some places, some neighborhoods that require it. That's there are some neighborhoods, especially in the Mill Creek, Snohomish kind of Everett area, that require. That's part of the CC&Rs, part of the HOAs that you have to have a presidential roof. So in some cases, it's necessary. You have to. In other cases, most buyers are not going to know the difference. They are not going to say, is this a 30-year composition roof or is this a 50-year presidential roof? And if it's a 50-year presidential, in a buyer's perception of value of that property is not going to be enough to justify the extra $10,000 that you've spent on that presidential roof.
Yeah, or way even more than that. A lot of those homes in the 80s and 90s that you're talking about, those neighborhoods, they used to do the wood shingle roofs, which are insanely expensive and they're a nightmare to maintain. You got to do skip sheeting. You can't even do plywood. So the presidential is better than that for sure. And I think at a certain price point on home, people expect to see a three-dimensional roof on there or a metal roof. But I think that's probably in the $1.5 million and up range where people expect to see that. So if you're under that, you can get away with just a normal 30-year roof.
Yep,
right?
100%. Exactly.
Okay, awesome.
So what about the fun stuff? What about the ones that do make money?
Yeah, so let's put on our HGTV for just a minute. And a lot of these are just going to be very surface level enhancements to the home and things that are going to produce a really favorable ROI, a good return on investment. These are things where if you put $1 in for them, you might get $3 or $4 back when you go to sell your house, which is pretty cool. This is the kind of conversation that we have with sellers every single day. We go look through their homes as we help them decide what to do and what not to do to their homes so they actually sell it for more money. The first one is the floor coverings. Floor coverings are one of the best investments you can do in a home to make more money off of it. So we're talking LVP flooring, we're talking newer carpet, things like that. Perhaps tile in the bathrooms. Tile can get pretty expensive, but LVP is still acceptable in bathrooms as well. Totally get away with that. So I would look at the floors first.
100%. Yeah. The next one, which is obviously my absolute favorite, is repainting the interior, right?
And the exterior too, right?
Yeah, and the exterior too. But, what happens over time, again, if you've lived in a home or if you have kids, a lot of times people will want to customize the kids' rooms and paint them a color that they really like. And all of a sudden you walk through the home and you're like, okay, I have a pink room and I have a green room and I have a blue room and the master has a hunter green accent wall. Those can all be fine. But the biggest ROI that you're going to have when you're going to sell in the next couple of years is to repaint everything a very neutral color that a buyer can walk into and picture themselves in. The second that it's too custom and the paint is too different room to room, it's going to be too distracting for a buyer. It's going to feel like a lot of work for the buyer.
What's a good paint color?
Well, Honestly, like tried and true, Sherwin-Williams Agreeable Gray is the hands down best like investment. It can go gray, it can go beige, it can go white depending on the lighting. So perfect option. This 2024 has actually been the year of total neutral and warming up a little bit. So Pure White by also Sherwin-Williams has been my go-to for everybody's walls in the interior. It feels boring. A lot of people say it feels really sterile.
It feels like a hospital to me.
So it totally depends. If you've got any sort of wood cabinets. So if you have white cabinets, go with the Agreeable Gray walls. If you've got any sort of wood, even an old oak, or if you've got like a maple or an espresso or any other warm color wood in your cabinetry, go with the Pure White wall.
Interesting. Okay. Well, you're the designer, not me, so I'll leave that up to you. One of the ones you brought up that I thought was a really good idea is designer mirrors. Like a lot of these homes have builder style mirrors that have just been kind of put in place. Can you explain why this is a great return on investment?
100%. Okay. So there's several things that I have clients do in their bathrooms, and if any homes built from like 1970s, 80s, 90s through the 2000s, the builders just put this like plain, flat, square mirror that like fit the wall in the bathroom over the vanity, right? And then above that is like the plain old, light fixture. So if we just pull that mirror down, replace that light fixture, paint behind it, and then put up either a round, like a framed round oval or like a rounded rectangle mirror with an updated light fixture. Now, you have to be careful about this, because if your hardware, right, if your doorknobs are a brushed nickel, or if they're a chrome, or if they're black, you need to match the light fixture. You can't do a different finish on the light fixture than what you have in the rest of the home, but you can update whatever it is. That one thing, replacing the mirror, replacing the light fixture, painting behind it to match the walls, will completely upgrade your bathroom. And you don't even have to do anything with the vanity. It's wild how that changes the bathroom. It feels completely custom all of a sudden.
Yeah, like bonus points if you paint the outdated oak cabinets, right?
Totally. Yeah. If you want, if you've got old oak cabinets and you prime those babies, you paint them like a nice sage, or you paint them like an agreeable gray color, or even white, depending on the floor coloring, man, you have a complete remodel of a bathroom, and you've probably spent less than $800.
Definitely. Okay. So on the larger side of things, I mean, people always talk about kitchens and bathrooms. Like, obviously these are huge to driving the value of a home. Do you want to talk about what's reasonable, what's unreasonable to spend in these areas?
Yeah. I mean, so again, this is really going to come down to timing. So if you're thinking like, oh, I really need to remodel this kitchen, I really need to do all these things to it, but you're planning on selling in the next year or two, maybe even 3, you really don't want to go all out. You don't want to completely replace all the cabinetry and all the appliances and all the countertops. If you're in more of a short term, which I would consider 3 years or less, and you're looking to probably sell in that time frame, now the best option to do would be to have the cabinets repainted or refinished, and then countertops can be a good option. You can get affordable quartz, right, or a low-grade granite, especially if you have like a tile or a Formica countertop. That's a really reasonable upgrade. So when it comes to the kitchen, we're going to try to spend less than $8,000 to $10,000 maximum if you're looking to sell in the next couple of years. But it really is going to be kind of depending on your property.
Yeah, and if you crack into the cabinets, you're pushing that more to like 25.
That's exactly right. Yeah. If you're replacing cabinetry, you're like you said, cresting into some big money, where, a lot of people over the last couple of years have opted to paint cabinets and then even remove a couple of cabinets strategically within the home and replace with just like a floating shelf, which looks really modern, which looks really nice.
Totally updates the look.
Yeah, completely updates the kitchen. So that's a really inexpensive way to kind of update a kitchen without having to replace cabinets.
Yeah, for sure. And you'd probably do appliances then at that point too, just so it looks updated.
Yeah. So, and I tell people, like, if you say you've replaced your oven, say your oven died, you replace the oven, and now they don't all match. It just needs to match. It does not absolutely have to be all brand new, but if everything was white and then you got a stainless steel oven because that's what you wanted to eventually move everything to, make sure everything else also is stainless steel. Got it. Okay. Anything else on upgrades? I think, you mentioned the exterior paint. I think, like, especially if you're going to be selling in a time of year that's a little, any time of year if you're going to be selling, if you have not updated the exterior paint of your home, there's 2 different things that you can do. Number one, if the color itself on the siding is decent, like you don't have any big sunshade or, dimming or anything like that, just simply having the trim painted will brighten up the entire home. If the color is a darker color, like a dark blue or like a gray, a darker slate kind of color, and you are seeing some like fading in some of the siding, siding, it's going to be worth it just to repaint the entire thing. And that, depending on your size of home, can run $6,000 to $10,000, including the trim. But that is a worthy investment because people will come and say, hey, this fresh paint, they know what the value is of fresh exterior paint. And a lot of people will say, yeah, that's worth me not having to do for the next 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, makes total sense. I think you'd mentioned something about like hearths or making sure the fireplace inside looked kind of replicate too, right?
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. So a lot of homes will have like an older brick surround, and a lot of them will have like also like an old brick hearth, right? Like the bottom, kind of threshold of the fireplace. And so a really easy and inexpensive upgrade is to either whitewash or to paint the brick, and then to replace the bottom hearth instead of the brick, do like a more modern updated tile. So a smooth tile or even a slate will completely change the look of that fireplace. I had a client that did this in Linwood in a property a couple months back, and it just completely updated the entire living room. He painted the bricks white and then did the threshold down below a white tile. It looked beautiful, and it was pretty dang expensive, less than $400 installed.
Nice. On the landscaping side of things, I mean, there's kind of like a fine line that you should go to and that you shouldn't cross over to get return on investment, right? Could you break that down for people? Because obviously, like if you're going to sell, really the year you sell, you want to do a landscape touch up for sure. But I also see people like it's pretty trendy right now to go spend $50,000 to $100,000 on landscaping.
Yeah, I mean, it's just there's so much that you can do, and especially if you're bringing in a landscape company and getting like a bid to do it, they're going to want to go all out. Like they're going to want to do everything. So really, really important that, if you have a good base of grass, especially in grassy areas in your yard, it's not necessary to rip all that out and put sod. Sod is very expensive, especially in our area. Unless you have built-in sprinklers, it likely will die anyways. So just continue to sprinkle on some top seed, like put a little bit of topsoil, add some top seed, let that kind of grow. In regards to the actual garden beds, just clean it up. It does not have to be perfect. It does not have to be absolutely beautiful, but having contrast is the most important thing. And by contrast, I mean, you've got the driveway, you've got the grass kind of growing in. Now put a darker bark in place. Don't just leave it like the plain dirt. Put some nice dark bark, some thin stuff in those garden beds, and really tidy up and trim the bushes, the plants. Another trick that's really, really simple to do is get a couple of pots and put fresh flowers right on your doorstep, like on the walkway up. It'll immediately update the curb appeal of your home too.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah. If you're thinking about selling, if you're like between 3 and 9 months out from selling, then we'd want to have a much more specific conversation with you, because some of these things we'll want to really freshen up just to pop them when you go to sell. But this was really more just the context of hey, should I spend this money to invest in my home while I'm going to stay here or not? So I think that really frames it quite well for people. We, of course, help people buy and sell real estate all the time. If you're thinking about selling your house and you want to have a conversation about what to do or what not to do to your home, of course, reach out to us. We can hop on a phone call. We can pop out to your house, take a look at it with you, and give you very specific guidance on what we think you should do, and maybe more importantly, what you should not do to that home to make sure you don't waste any money. If you want to get in touch with us, of course, you can find us on meetthenovaks.com. I'm at The Real Mike Novak on Instagram. If you could please share, subscribe this video to anyone else think would get value out of it, that would mean a ton for us as well.
Absolutely. You can find me on Instagram at Rachel Novak.
See you next week.